had wings like Nora's dove, I'd fly up the river to the one I love. Fare thee well, my honey. Fare thee well. I had a man who was long and tall. Oh, he moved his body like a cannonball. Fare thee well, my honey. Fare thee well. I remember one evening in the pouring rain. Oh, in my heart felt an aching pain. Fare thee well, my honey. Fare thee well. Muddy river is muddy and wild. Can't give a bloody for my unborn child. Fare thee well, my honey. Fare thee well. There was a bird flying high above. Oh, life ain't worth living without the one you love. Fare thee well, my honey. Fare thee well. Fare thee well, my honey. Fare thee well. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Movie Club. Welcome to September. Good Lord, we've been doing this for God knows how many weeks at this point. It's like March 1143 at this point, so we're just gonna keep on trucking, at least until April of next year, or whenever this pandemic finally decides to end. But this week I'm actually genuinely excited that you're here because we're going to watch one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm talking about the Coen brothers' 2014 musical extravaganza that also delves into some serious topics about what it means to live as an artist. And that is the folk song picture that is Inside Llewyn Davis. Now, the Coens aren't any strangers to stories like this. In fact, one of the most popular films by them is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, starring George Clooney. And it features a soundtrack by T-Bone Burnett, who returned for Inside Llewyn Davis. And the partnership between Burnett and the Coens produces some of the best music you may have ever heard. Now, both soundtracks are pulling from discographies and folk artists and just music that's out in the ether that's a part of the culture that the movies are representing. Here we're looking at mostly songs that are kind of being pulled from Greenwich Village in the early 60s. You might remember this famous artist who is not really that small of a guy anymore. And whether or not you necessarily love Bob Dylan's voice, he's an important part of this time, this history of folk music, and especially this time in folk music. This film is about a folk singer by the name of Llewyn Davis, who is played by the inimitable Oscar Isaac. Now, Isaac in recent years has been in all sorts of films, whether that was starring in the Alex Garland film Ex Machina, or a giant sci-fi series that, I don't know, some of us might not be a huge fan of, but most people have at least heard of it. Star Wars? I'm not super familiar with it at all. But Oscar Isaac is a big-name actor right now. But in 2014, he was still kind of an up-and-coming star. This was just prior to his casting in the new Star Wars trilogy, so he hadn't really blown up and been in something that was a major motion picture yet. But here, I think, he delivers his best performance so far. Oscar Isaac here conveys such deep emotion and something that is so true to so many people who grow up wanting to be artists. And I think his struggle in this film is not that unique for people like us, for people who want to create art. Because at the end of the day, Llewyn only wants to make music that is true to himself and that people love. Because much like any artist that's put on this planet, we feel called to this. We want to entertain you. We want to make stuff that reveals our deepest desires, but at the same time is universal. That's what art is really all about, and that's why Roger Ebert called films, and by extension all art, engines of empathy. Whilst Llewyn may not be a folk singer you've heard of because he is a fictionalized singer, his story is loosely based off the tale of folk singer Dave Von Ronk, who was active around this time. If you haven't heard of Dave Von Ronk, I highly suggest digging into the Smithsonian selection on him, because those songs are fantastic. Some of the songs that he played but didn't necessarily make popular are some of the best recordings of said songs. But much like every Coen brother film, there are so many different layers to this. This film, in many ways, is like an onion, much like Ogres. Because this film is also a loose adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey. Much looser than the Coen brothers' earlier film that was itself a much more direct adaptation of that. I'm talking, of course, of the DNA-sharing film, O Brother, Where Art Thou? If you've seen that film, watching Inside Llewyn Davis is going to feel a little bit like deja vu. Those two films are trying to accomplish two incredibly different things. O Brother, Where Art Thou is a delightful film, fun from the first frame to the last, and the cinematography in that film, captured by Roger Deakins, is some of the best I've seen in recent memory. However, Inside Llewyn Davis is a much more cold film. It reserves itself. It's something that reveals itself to you more and more each time you return to it. It's not a film that gives itself to you completely the first time. I missed it in theaters because this film did not get the debut that it deserved. It barely got any attention, though it is liked by critics and by a good portion of the Coen fan base. I think this is one of the forgotten films by the Coens. Most people don't know about this movie. Even Coen heads, if you talk to them and you ask them what their favorite film is, usually when you bring up Inside Llewyn Davis, they're like, oh, I've heard of that one, but I haven't gotten around to seeing it. And in that way, this film is an even more special community. Because when you find someone that has seen it, they often have had the same experience that you have. Because as someone who's been plagued by anxiety throughout pretty much all of my life, and especially now in the midst of a pandemic, creating art is one of the most anxious and nerve-wracking things that you can do. And I felt like this film showed me myself. Llewyn at times can be, for lack of a better term, a bit of a prick. And I think this is the linchpin for a lot of people who saw this film and didn't necessarily care for the character of Llewyn Davis, is I think he's much more of a mirror to the audience than we'd like him to be, because it shows us our warts and all. And I think that's what makes this film so special. Not only is it an intimate and beautifully crafted film with cinematography from Bruno Del Bonal, and some of the best performances the Coen brothers have ever gotten out of any of their casts, it's also a deeply melancholic, yet I think hopeful, at least in my interpretation, film about the nature of creating art. There's never been a better film that's exemplified the nature of a folk song. Much as Llewyn Davis says, it was never new, and it never gets old, so it must be a folk song. Oscar Isaac isn't the only great actor in this film. We've also got the likes of Carey Mulligan, Justin Timberlake, John Goodman, Garrett Hedlund, and so many more. Oh, did I mention that Adam Driver's in this film that delivers some of the funniest performances in the entire running time? This film, when it's funny, is delightful. And when it decides to show some of the more melancholic parts of life, it's devastating. And since this film is kind of a slice of life, it's literally a week in the life of Llewyn Davis, living in 1961 Greenwich Village in New York, and his trials and tribulations to become the artist that he thinks he deserves to be. It's much in the way that Roger Ebert described It's a Wonderful Life. It's a film that gets better with repeated viewings and with age. This is a film that in 20 years, I think will be one of the best regarded films, not only of this decade, but of this century. This film also is given a beautiful window to the mental health community. There have been countless video essays that detail how people with depression, when they watched this film, felt seen, felt heard the first time, because this film conveys what it's like to experience that so well. One of my favorite video essays on this film of all time is Ryan Hollinger's great video on it. Typically, Hollinger reserves his videos for horror films, so the fact that he selected Llewyn Davis at all is kind of a shocker. But his video essay on it is one of the best he's ever written, and it's some incredible analysis as well. If you've never really listened to folk music before, it's kind of like it removes the author from it. Songs are a collective, a thing that belongs to everybody. And many artists nowadays will agree in much the same way. Writing a song or crafting an album is just a small collective of people that are tightly knit and working on a singular vision of a song. But when you release it into the wild, your interpretation of what those lyrics mean is just one of many now. And that's the beauty of all art. You might see yourself in a different character than Llewyn, but you also might see a lot of yourself in Llewyn. You might see this film as a deeply melancholic yet hopeful film like I do, or you might see this film in a more depressing light, as Llewyn might be damned to push the rock up the hill for the rest of his life, only to have it roll back down on him every single day. And that's a valid interpretation. That's the beauty with art. It means so much to me and so much to so many different people, but now I'm excited for it to mean something to you. I hope you love this film as much as I do, and maybe you'll love it in different ways than I do. But regardless, in many ways, I'm giving you this folk song now. This folk song that has meant so much to me, I'm sharing it with you. So, without further ado, thank you for joining us yet again for Movie Club. And now we are proud to present tonight's screening of the 2014 Coen Brothers film, Inside Llewyn Davis.